One.
This meeting is being recorded.
Welcome to another episode of the Less is More Sports Podcast. Before we get started on the main topic today, Matt wants to give me a hard time about something that I said may or may not happen. So, Matt, take it away.
Well, I think anyone who lives in this area woke up to quite a shock on Monday, this past Monday, when it was announced that Scott Satterfield was leaving the University of Louisville for the University of Cincinnati, which in another thing that makes no sense to me, doesn't make any sense to me. But anyway, people were off speculating who the coach of the Louisville Cardinals was going to be from that point on. And everyone and their brother in the Louisville media thought this was finally going to be the homecoming for former quarterback and beloved local figure Jeff Brom. And at first I'm reading about it, it's like, okay, maybe this will happen and maybe this won't. And then I saw one tweet that changed my whole perspective on where this was going. Somebody who's on this show who isn't me and isn't Bean posted, "Oh, that ain't happening. He's not coming." And that minute I saw that tweet, I knew Jeff Brom was coming home. Because Les, you can't just say things like that and then not expect them to come back and peck you in the ass like a cardinal when when they actually occur. So the minute I saw that tweet, I knew that we were going to either have to try to avoid talking about it, or Les was going to do everything in his power to make this show about something that had nothing to do with that. But yeah, we have to acknowledge that, Les. You can't just get away with that in the Ohio Valley and expect no one to notice, Les.
So,
You
I
you
think
you,
it's
you
safe
haven't.
to say that when we do our annual wrong predictions podcast, that's going to be like at the top of the list, right?
It doesn't have to be the top. It just has to be near the top.
I can do that. That's fair.
Near the top. But the minute I saw that, I was like, yeah, Jeff Brom's coming home. There's no doubt in my mind. This will be the one prediction that Les makes that just comes back and hits him right in the face. And it's like that scene from SpongeBob where SpongeBob slides along the glass as Squidward's coming into work, and he's like, "That's you and me right now." Because the minute you tweeted, I'm like, "I hope I get that moment," and I did, and I did. So that's the show for this week. Everybody can just tune us out now. We're done talking about it. So let's say you're sorry, and that's the show.
I apologize because I thought Jeff Brom had already turned down Louisville once, and I thought he was going to do it again. So that was my swing and a miss prediction. But yes,
All right.
like Matt alluded to,
All right.
ironically enough, Scott Satterfield is gone. He'll be back here in a second. But Satterfield is gone for the University of Cincinnati, which is very ironic because in about 6 days on the 17th, both Louisville and Cincinnati will be playing in the Fenway Bowl. However, to avoid any kind of awkwardness, Scott Satterfield will not be coaching in this game, and former Super Bowl MVP Deion Branch will serve as the interim head coach for the Louisville Cardinals. But now, whenever Matt decides to get back onto the show, we're going to get into the main topic of today's show, which we're going to talk about bowl games. So, this guy. So for the before we get into talking about the college football playoff, we're going to talk about some other bowl games, which if you follow the show, you know this is just going to be an excuse for me to be a homer and talk about Duke and Texas. And Matt's going to give you the bowl games because his beloved Hoosiers did not make a bowl game that I don't believe.
I don't even watch Indiana football, buddy. So I watch like one, maybe two games a year because I know how it ends. It's like knowing how a bad movie will end before you even go into it. So it's like, do I really want to waste my time watching this team go 4-8 again, or do I actually want to watch Ohio State play Michigan? I'm going to
So
watch Ohio State play Michigan.
fair enough. But to allude to what I'm saying, though, is that Matt's going to give you a bowl matchup that you probably weren't thinking of, but you probably should be thinking of it because it's going to be really entertaining. So without
Hell
further
yeah.
ado, Matt, what is one bowl game that not a lot of people are talking about that you think is going to be very intriguing?
Les, I'm telling you now, the best game of the bowl season that's not a playoff game is happening the very first day I think bowl games are actually played, and that's the Cure Bowl. It's the first ranked matchup of the bowl season because it's number 24 versus 25, or number 22 versus number 24, depending on which bowl you're using. and it's got two teams who won their conference championships with explosive offenses, a 7-year quarterback now. I mean, it's got everything you want. Of course, I'm talking about the Cure Bowl between the 11-2 University of Texas San Antonio Roadrunners and the Troy Trojans out of the Sun Belt. Thus, this is going to be one hell of a game. UTSA averages 38.7 points a game. They have a quarterback named, let me get his name right, Frank Harris, who just declared he's coming back for his seventh. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 year of college football. 3,000 yards this season. I mean, 31 touchdowns. This team scores in droves. They've been ranked most of the year. I mean, they're a good team, and it's not like that. And Troy, they have a first-year head coach. They won about 2 games last year, and now they've only lost to Ole Miss, who we all know is pretty good, in spite of Lane Kiffin's unnecessarily angry tweets he's been having this week. And they lost to Appalachian State, who everyone remembers should have beaten North Carolina and did beat Texas A&M and won a very competitive Sun Belt conference. So that's going to be a fun game. It's rock meets hard place because you have the offense of the UTSA, like I said, scoring nearly 40 points a game. You have a very stout Troy Trojans defense who don't like to give up a lot of points. And even then, Troy, thanks to their quarterback, Gunnar Watson, easily score about 27.5 points a game. So that's going to be a great way to kick off the bowl season. An explosive offense, two really good under the radar quarterbacks, two really good under the radar offenses. One defense clearly better than the other, but the fireworks in this game are going to be absolutely incredible. This is going to make Thunder over Louisville look like your uncle's backyard with the illegal fireworks that he bought in Tennessee. That's how good this game is going to be, I think. And I mean, we're talking about a final score that should, if everything plays up to the way it should be, end up being like 42-45. It's going to be a hell of a game.
So, of course, the first game I'm going to talk about is going to be the team that I'm, repping right now with the hat on, and that's the Texas Longhorns, who will be playing Washington in the Alamo Bowl on December 29th. Now, ironically enough, social media wanted it to be Texas versus USC because, narratives. Lincoln Riley faces off against the Horns one more time. But obviously, we got Texas versus Washington instead, which is still, I think, going to be a very good matchup in its own right. A lot of the narratives going into this game was it was going to be Texas's defense versus Washington offense because we know Washington's got the number one offense in college football. As you and I alluded to in our first crazy coaching carousel episode, how good of a job Kalen DeBoer was going to do. And he made his presence felt in year one. But honestly, though, there's another narrative that I want to talk about it. And
oh God, I know where this is going.
Do you though? Because as you all know, on Saturday, Caleb Williams became the 7th Heisman Trophy winner to play for USC. However, that's not what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about is, as always, after the Heisman winner is announced, they come out with these way too early predictions for who's going to be the Heisman Trophy winner next season. Coming in at number 7 on that list was Arch Manning. There's one problem with that. Quinn Ewers is still there. I know Quinn Ewers has struggled this year, but he's also had very bright moments, like against Alabama before the injury, against Oklahoma. And I think this is going to be a very important game for him because he's got no Bijan Robinson. He's going pro. He's got no Roschon Johnson. He's also going pro. That Texas defense, that one of the narratives that we're talking about, they're missing their captain and DeMarvion Overshown. He's going to pro. He's sitting out. But what Quinn Ewers does have, he's got all his receiving weapons there. Xavier Worthy, Jatavion Sanders, Jordan Whittington. And he's also going up against the 90th ranked pass defense in college football. So Quinn Ewers needs to have a big game if he wants to change the narrative that Arch Manning will be in the Heisman conversation tomorrow and that he will conclude his Texas regime on top before Manning takes the reins. So without further ado, that is the biggest narrative for that game. So Matt, do you have another bowl game you want to talk to before I become a homer again and talk about Duke versus UCF?
Yeah, you know what? It involves one of the local teams, and it's going to be one of the greatest bowl games of all time because I don't even know who is going to win. I don't even know what the final score will be. I don't even know how you could set an over under in this game. Unless one of the great games that we're going to be able to watch very soon. Iowa and Kentucky.
Oh gosh, I knew you were gonna say it, and I was hoping you didn't.
No, you knew I was going there. There, there is no Will Levis. There is no Chris Rodriguez. There is no Spencer Petras. Iowa is playing their third string quarterback. Kentucky doesn't have an offensive coordinator right now, even though, much like Louisville, they made a very good hire this week with Liam Cohen from the Los Angeles Rams. But he's not going to be there for this game. Les, I don't know. These two teams are in the top 15 in scoring defenses and in the bottom 15 in scoring offenses. It's going to be one of the greatest games of all time. Kentucky and Iowa always have great punters. And I am seriously intrigued to see how anyone passes 10 points in this game. Because needless to say, I would have picked Kentucky if everyone was playing, and more power to the players for not doing it. There's no point in tanking your NFL draft stock, playing in the Music City Bowl, and breaking your leg. So more power to Will Levis and all the guys who are sitting this one out. But this game is going to be great just because I don't know how anyone is going to hit 20 points. Maybe someone's going to hit 10, but this is going to be one of those games where you remember where you were when you watched Iowa and Kentucky play to a 6-3 or 5-3 final. And that's all I've got to say. It's beautiful. It's sickening. It's everything wrong and everything beautiful about American college football. And it will bring us all to tears. So the Music City Bowl between the University of Kentucky and Iowa. Just sit back, strap in, and don't do any drinking games about punting because you'll be drunk by the end. But by the end of the first quarter,
You might
and
be
if
dead.
you keep that, you might be dead. Yes, I was about to say you'll blow your kidneys out and your liver by halftime. And like Les said, by the fourth quarter, you will most likely be in a catonic state brought on by alcohol. You will be a beer battered football fan, just waiting to be fried. But we'll all enjoy it, and we'll all enjoy it together.
I'm not going to enjoy it at all. I probably won't even watch it, to be completely honest, because this is going to be the gosh awful, the most boring college football game of bowl season. I mean, I don't even know over under of 10 pass attempts and 4 passing yards for this game. And I mean, there's not even a Will Levis for me to make fun of. So this is just going to be boring. I mean, you're not going to see me like take pictures from Legend Crab of a trash can and say, hey, ran into Will Levis today. So which unfortunately I'm seeing more and more that he's going to be the next Colts quarterback, and Lord help me, please. But yeah, that's going to be the most boring game ever. So
he can't be as bad as the one they have right now. I'm just saying. He could be worse and more entertaining, or he could be better. Either way, I'm going to be fine.
I'm not. Well, anyways,
we'll retank for Arch Manning. It's all okay. That's Jim Irsay's master plan.
Yeah, let's run it back with Arch Manning and Marvin Harrison Jr. Let's do it. Like you said, Jim Irsay better sell one of those guitars.
Yep. He can give up George Harrison's like underwear to go out and get that extra pick, or convince Edgerrin James's kid to play football. That's all I gotta say. You know, William S. Burroughs' fountain pen. That yeah, you just pay the rent for like all the former Colts guys to come back in, and Jeff Saturday can coach them. It'll all be the happiest reunion of all time, and we'll make Bob Knight the mascot while we're living in the past. It'll be great.
So, anyways, before we get into the college football playoff talk of this portion of this podcast, I'm going to talk about my Blue Devils, who have made their first bowl appearance since 2018, and they're matching up against a team that's went to 7 straight bowl games in University of Central Florida. One thing I did notice I want to talk about where my Blue Devils have a chance is that UCF allowed 648 yards of offense against Tulane in the conference championship game.
Yeah,
and their defense ranks 147th in the nation. So my Blue Devils have a chance. Yes.
If I may interject one thing in here.
Absolutely.
The game before they got blown out by Tulane in the championship for the American Athletic, they nearly were upset by a South Florida team that didn't even really have a coach, that had either no wins or one on the year, and needed a last second comeback to beat them and score 46 points to beat a team that was 0-11 in the AAC, man. So
Mhm.
I think that assessment is what's going to do them in right there, especially going against Mike Elko.
Yeah, Mike Elko is a great coach, obviously the deserved ACC Coach of the Year. And I think this is going to be a big game for Riley Leonard, who has been showing week in and week out why he should have never been the lowest ranked ACC starting quarterback heading into the season. But that concludes the bowl games that are not important. Well, I don't want to say it like that, but it's kind of true. So
Yeah.
now we get to the college football playoff, and we are going to go to the 1-4 matchup on December 31st at 8 p.m., the Peach Bowl, Georgia versus Ohio State. And Matt, I'm going to take it over. I'm going to let you take over here in a second because a lot of what we do here on the Less is More Sports podcast is we talk about the social media presence in sports. And let me tell you, social media says that Georgia is going to just absolutely blow out Ohio State. The word that they keep using, Matt, is boat raced, which I never even heard that till this week. So anyways,
I said boat race on this podcast several times.
I don't remember you ever saying boat race before.
I've said boat race, mollywopped, boat race. I come up with fun words, Les. I'm the fun words guy.
You are. I just never heard boat race, to be completely honest. But anyways,
Might have been in the early days.
as we talked about before, as we talked about prior on previous episodes, the average margin of victory in the 1-4 matchup is 21 points. That's a point that we made about the Cincinnati Bearcats last year. So two-part question. A, does this hold up today? Or B, what does Ohio State have to do to win?
First of all, I don't know why people would say boat raced about this. I mean, Cincinnati versus Alabama, yes, is a mismatch. Alabama versus Notre Dame was a mismatch. The 1-4 is generally a mismatch of some sort because we get held in by narrative, like we've always talked about. And if the 4 seed was SC, I would actually agree with that because I don't think there's any way in hell that SC could have stopped. As much as I love Caleb Williams and Lincoln Riley, I don't think there's any way in hell it would have been like that LSU Oklahoma game from 2020, where you could had two great offense, but it was clear that one team actually had a defense that could stop the other one. It would have been like that. It would have been like a 62-35 type ball game where we were all entertained, but it wasn't close. And this game, I don't foresee being like that. I like Georgia. I think Georgia's a little bit bigger in the trenches and a little bit more physical than Ohio State. Michigan did expose a little bit of that in that ball game. So, but I still think Georgia is bigger in the trenches. I think that's how they'll win the game. They'll be more physical than Ohio State up front, defensively and offensively. But there's no way in hell this is going to be a 40-point ball game. At worst, I'm thinking this could be a 17-point ball game. Ohio State, in order to win, they've got to get a better effort out of their defense, especially that run defense. And that's because, like I said, it's mind-boggling to me that we're talking about like Ohio State getting run off the field. And I know that yes, they did against Michigan, but the flaws were more obvious on what you need to work on there. And you got to hit the gaps a little bit harder at the running back, and you've got to use your receivers more adequately than what they did. Push that ball downfield. Try to get your own running game going. I don't know what Travion Henderson's status will be. I assume he's probably not going to play. But we're forgetting to Ohio State was down a couple running backs. So I don't think this is going to be a boat race by any means. I think Georgia wins the game by dominating in the trenches because I think they can do that. Ohio State wins the game by like trying to have a more balanced offense, having a little bit more explosiveness in the run game, trying to push the ball downfield a little bit further. I know they have guys who aren't going to play. I mean, that passing attack is what their best chance is. There's no doubt about it. You've got a Heisman Trophy finalist. If you want to beat Georgia, they're going to have to lean on that passing game. CJ Stroud is going to have to be incredibly sharp because we've seen that Georgia, as good as they are defensively, are subject to like inexplicable results, like barely beating Kent State. struggling with Vanderbilt for a very long time. They had some problems with Georgia Tech. So like Georgia, like so in summary, just to TLDR, the whole damn thing I just said. Georgia wins by being physical in the trenches, offensively and defensively. Ohio State wins by leaning into that passing game. Caleb Stroud being the Heisman finalist, we know he is, and having a great performance because he throws for 300 yards plus in 6 of 12 games. That's half the games of the season. You've got to lean into him. You've still got one of the better receiving corps in the country, even without Jackson Smith and Jingba. This is going to be fine. As long as they can protect CJ Stroud and he has time to throw, that's what's going to make this game a lot more close than I think anyone is thinking. Granted, I'm still taking the Bulldogs, but I'm just taking them 30 to 27 instead of like I don't know what people are thinking.
They're thinking they're going to get boat raced apparently. So, which I didn't even know Matt has ever said on this show. I mean, I feel kind of goofy for that. But so it's interesting that you talked about how Ohio State's got to get their receivers involved and kind of push the ball down the field because when I was looking over the notes, the one thing I did see that Georgia's weaknesses is that they are 52nd in passing yards allowed, which
Yes.
you can make a couple different analysis over that. You could talk about the talent that they do play week in and week out in the SEC, or you could also make the assumption that they get up on teams early and that forces them to pass the ball from an earlier stage in the game. So that racks up yards that way. But anyways, on the ground game, as much as I'm a believer in you got to run the ball to be able to open up the pass game, Ohio State's got their work cut out for them. Georgia, they're the second ranked defense in all of college football, but they're number 1 in rushing yards allowed at 77 yards a game. However, even with the status of Travion Henderson kind of being a mystery, you still have someone like Mayan Williams and Dallas Hayden. Maybe if they can wear down that Georgia front line, which is easier said than done, I agree. They might have some success in the running game and open up a little bit. But the biggest matchup that I do want to look at, and I'm talking about 2 future first-round picks, and that's Marvin Harrison Jr., who should have won the Biletnikoff. I'm sorry, no offense, Jalen Hyatt. You know what, Matt? I'm going to say this right now. My childhood dog's name was Hyatt, but I still was – but that still doesn't mean that I think he's a better receiver than Marvin Harrison Jr. So, but the matchup I want to see is Marvin Harrison Jr. versus Kelly Ringo. 2 future first-round picks, wide receiver, and at DB. I think that's going to be a really fun matchup.
I will.
Yeah. So, but yeah, if Ohio State is going to be able to beat Georgia and, prove my preseason title prediction right, they've got to attack that passing game because obviously the 52nd in pass yards allowed is an area that the Buckeyes can take advantage of. But regardless of who wins, as long as either one of these 2 teams win the championship, I'm technically right. Some way, somehow, some way. You want to know why?
Why?
Because if Ohio State wins and they go on to win the championship, my preseason championship prediction is correct. If Georgia wins this game and they go on to win the national championship, that just means that the Georgia dynasty that I predicted is already here.
Oh, God.
So, yes.
Oh, well.
So you better hope that one of the so just for the sake of not inflating my ego even farther, you better hope one of the teams from our next game we're going to talk about wins the title because this is now social media believes this is going to be the better of the 2 games. And so Matt, what are your thoughts on the Fiesta Bowl? Bean keeps smacking. So the Fiesta Bowl gets
not to laugh, but he's going to town.
Yeah, he was smacking me.
He's like, "Oh, shut up your face." Oh.
He's like, "Shut up."
Shut up, Les. That's enough out of you. Well, the first thing I'd like to point out is how they murdered the Fiesta Bowl logo. It used to be amazing, and now it looks just like something your grandma would send on a Christmas card instead of being that really awesome Tostitos Fiesta Bowl logo. So, bad job, Fiesta Bowl. Bad job. But secondly, I once again disagree with the media. I mean, TCU is a great story. Sonny Dykes is a great story. Max Duggan's a great story. So is Michigan. Yeah, but I just look at the schedule. I know Michigan played nobody, but Michigan did play in the Big Ten. They beat Ohio State pretty handily. They beat Penn State. They beat a lot of good teams to stay unbeaten. And they also beat Purdue. Sorry. Sorry, Jeff Brom. That was a low blow, I know. But I think about how TCU is. They only have one loss, yes. But I think about how unimpressive their biggest wins are. I mean, the Texas win was okay. The
Let's
first
be honest. If Quinn Ewers shows up, we win that game.
they probably do. The Baylor game where you have to have some amazing you have the Flash out there, not Ezra Miller, just the Flash out there running the football out with no time left to kick a game-winning field goal. And then you absolutely, no offense, you kind of blew it against Kansas State and Deuce Vaughn. You let him Deuce Vaughn get loose a little too much. In overtime, your offense was a little bit weird. And next thing you know, Kansas State is the champion of the Big 12, and you're sweating at home, unlike Michigan, who's cruising at that point, found a way to overcome a slow start to beat Purdue, even without their best running back. They found a way to beat Purdue easily. So if there's any game that I think is going to be more of a blowout, it's this one, honestly. Unfortunately, the good thing about TCU is that they're a fourth quarter team. The bad thing about TCU is there may not be much of a fourth quarter to be competitive in if they don't get out into a quick start against Michigan. So, once again, I don't think we're talking about a 40-point game here, but I wouldn't be surprised if going into the fourth quarter, Michigan is up like 15. JJ McCarthy is a better quarterback than Shane McNamara. I'm sorry. He's just better in terms of passing. So I think that gives him an edge offensively that they didn't have, or he's got more of an it factor. I don't exactly
Wait,
know why.
who? Oh, Cade McNamara, the one
Yeah,
that went from one team that wouldn't let him throw to another team that won't let him throw. That
once
guy,
again, Iowa.
Iowa.
Iowa. But they're not playing. In fact, they're going to be playing in the greatest bowl game of all time some other time. But I just think the Michigan's offense has advanced enough to the point they can score a little bit more easily than they did when they were in the playoff last year. So I like Max Duggan. I think that TCU will surprise probably even me, even after saying all this, because I do like what they have on offense. They have a great receiving group. But I just think that this game is the one that Michigan finally gets to the championship. I think we're talking about like a 34 to 24 to 27 type ball game. So I'm going to, because I don't think that Michigan's defense and their offensive line will allow for TCU to have those heroics that they've had in other games. So I'm going to go with the Wolverines on this one. And like I said, I'm thinking 34 to 27, somewhere in that range.
So for the second consecutive pick, Matt just stuck his middle finger to the Twitterverse and said, "No, you're wrong. This is how the game's going to go." So I'm going to be completely honest because I was really prepared for you to talk about the injury of Blake Corum and then talk to me about how you actually favor the TCU Horned Frogs because even though they don't win pretty, they don't win impressive. They're that meme of a rib cage with dogs in it because they got that dog in them. Max Duggan got that dog in him. So I was prepared to actually talk about Michigan and how JJ McCarthy has 6 touchdowns and 1 interception in his last 2 games. How even though that their best running back, Blake Corum, who was a Doak Walker Award finalist, who didn't win because Mr. Lamborghini G-Ski did, as he should have. But Donovan Edwards has stepped up, and he's got 401 yards in his last 2 games on the ground. And you know how that defense is 5th in the nation. They're 3rd in rushing, 22nd in passing yards. But ironically enough, I'm going to spend more time showing love to a team that has not impressed me at all year long, and that's TCU. But they're the most impressive, unimpressive team I think I've ever seen. Because even though I watch their games and there's nothing that they do that wows me at all, and there's nothing that really stands out and says, "Whoa, they're really good." They just find ways to win. And you know what? I got a lot of love for Max Duggan because dude is a grinder. Even though they lost in the Big 12 championship against Kansas State, dude put his body on the line to give them the best chance to win that he could. Dude was literally just bent over, out of breath, after each rushing touchdown that he had in the closing minutes of that game. But I do think Michigan is the better team overall around. So I'm kind of mad at myself that I wasn't more prepared. But yeah, I was prepared that you were going to talk about the Horned Frogs just because they got that dog in them.
No, I mean, I love that meme as much as the next guy, but it's going to be hard for Max Duggan to be out of breath and struggling for air after running 40 yards when there will be no 40 yards to run into, because I don't think Michigan's going to allow that. And if they do, Jim Harbaugh will spontaneously or John Harbaugh. Jim might do it too. John Harbaugh might spontaneously combust on national television. We'll just look over and there will be a fireball where Jim Harbaugh once stood. His khaki pants will gleam as he like self-immolates into like a fire of righteous anger and Big Ten defense. I don't know, but I don't think the Max Duggan is going to find those holes that he found against Kansas State. I really don't. And it pains me to say it because, like you said, TCU is a great story. They're a great, scrappy underdog team. I mean, they even co-opted the Hypnotoad from Futurama and turned it into their mascot. But just like you can't tell me a horned frog isn't actually a lizard, you can't tell me. Well, actually, it is a lizard. Sorry, I need to rephrase that.
What was it
Much like
say?
much like a horned frog is actually a lizard, you can't say that TCU is actually, going to going to beat Michigan. And I'm sorry to be that blunt about it, but Michigan would have to play a pretty bad game, I think, to do it. And I'm like I said, TCU is great. They're a good team. They're a great story. I just can't see them beating a team with, like you said, a top five defense and a great run game, because that's one of the mistakes Kansas State made to get TCU back in is they almost scored too quickly sometimes. And with Michigan, you're going to get slow, methodic, precision drives that will bury you and like make sure you have no time on the clock. And if you do, the defense will make sure that you don't get that many the yards you need to succeed. So I got to roll with Michigan and then Georgia, and then who knows what's going to happen. We'll preview that if it happens later.
I thought we were going to do that right now, honestly, because I'm
Oh,
gonna rain on the TCU's parade one last time and talk about how Donovan Edwards has rushed for 401 yards in his last two games, and that's really bad because obviously he's playing really well, but
yeah.
TCU is 66 in the country in rushing defense, so that's kind of a recipe for disaster. But
Yeah.
anyways, so all right, you got Georgia coming out of the first game, right?
Yeah.
And you got Michigan coming out of the second game, right?
Yeah.
Who you got?
I would take Georgia in a close, very good game.
Mm-hmm.
I
I
mean,
thought you were good.
no,
Oh,
I mean, I can. I just didn't know if you wanted me to or not. I think that Georgia they just have such a good defense that people forget that because last year was just incredible in terms of draft picks. I like their defense. I like how physical they are up front. I know Michigan is very physical up front too. They have a great run game. I think the difference here could come down to quarterback play, strange as that may sound, because neither Stetson Bennett nor JJ McCarthy, I don't think they're exactly as good as CJ Stroud or Max Duggan or Caleb Williams. But I also think that like the guy who makes the mistake there, whether it be the young guy McCarthy or the kind of or the seasoned pro prone to a couple errors like Bennett, I think whoever makes the mistake at the quarterback position is probably going to be the guy who ends up costing his team the game. As sad as that is to say, but I think that one comes down to just mindset. And when I think about mindset, I'm going to go with the team with the quarterback that's been there before, and I'm going to go with Georgia.
that's a very fair analysis. But one last thing before we close, because we got about 5 minutes left. Did Stetson Bennett deserve to be in New York for the Heisman ceremony?
Mm, did he not? I think that's the more fair question. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, if Zach Corum isn't hurt, he's there. There are
Blake
a couple
Corum.
guys. Blake Corum. Who's Zach Corum? Never
I have
mind.
no idea.
I don't know if I made that up or if he was like a former like high school guy I knew, but I mean, if Blake Corum isn't hurt, he's the Michigan representative there. I mean, that's the weird thing about this. Is like I don't feel like he didn't deserve it. I just feel like he got there because a couple guys got hurt. I feel like, and I know you're going to talk about Bijan Robinson now because that's what you have to do. I think that the problem is that it just feels like they had to have a fourth guy, and he was just the fourth guy from the playoff team who did have 3,000 yards. Les, at the Academy Awards, sometimes there's a person who doesn't get an Oscar, or at the Grammys, there's a person who doesn't win an award but has had like a very awesome career, and they get like a lifetime achievement award for what they've done. This felt like Stetson Bennett's lifetime achievement award, if you know what I'm saying. It was a formality, a way of expressing like adoration for a good career that may not have been a chart topper, but was consistent, people liked it, and resulted in success. So I'm not gonna like dunk on the guy for having a lifetime achievement award. He didn't take away from the moment. Caleb Williams was the rightful winner. And I mean, that's all anyone remembers about the Heisman is who won it. It doesn't matter how many candidates they put up on that stage. I don't remember who was up for it when Johnny Manziel won. I just remember Johnny Manziel won. So I'm not going to dunk on the committee or the voters for giving a guy a lifetime achievement award, especially when they got the overall decision correct.
Stetson Bennett didn't deserve to be there. I hate it here. Look, he's a great game manager. He is great for Georgia. But nowhere at all during his entire career, let alone this season, did I look at Stetson Bennett and say, that guy is one of the best players in college football. Not at all. At no point did I even look at him and say, that guy's the best quarterback in the SEC. Look, I got into a debate, on social media this week, and a very good point was made that Stetson Bennett played really well in the ranked games that Georgia played this year. There's just one problem with that. He was pedestrian to below pedestrian in their unranked games. And the Heisman is a season award for a full season body of work. Yes, if I'm Kirby Smart, I'm ecstatic that he's playing his best ball against the ranked opponents. But if I'm looking at who's the Heisman Trophy winner, you have to be some level of consistent. And you can't play great in some games and pedestrian in others and expect to be nominated for the Heisman Trophy. That's my opinion. I don't ever feel like game managers have ever been really suited for the Heisman Trophy winner. If that was the case, A.J. McCarron should have won it in 2012 because, well, he did pretty much the same thing. The best argument you can make for Bennett, you can make for McCarron. So that's just where I stand. But we got about a minute and a half left. Matt, what you got?
So you see, the thing about that is, Les, Brad Johnson and Joe Flacco's and Trent Dilfer's Super Bowl rings count about as much as Patrick Mahomes is right now. So game managing does win things, first of all.
Just not Heisman's.
No, number two, where you want to talk about guys who didn't choke under pressure, he didn't perform well against unranked opponents. Why are you holding that against? Why do you hold that against him when Caleb Williams went down against ranked opponents? He faced the defense, kicked his butt. C.J. Stroud, he got exposed. He got a little bit roughed up by Michigan, and none of these guys had a Heisman moment. I mean, Max Duggan came the closest, and he and Caleb Williams had theirs in championship week. The votes had already been tallied.
We got less than a minute. The only thing I'll say to that is Caleb Williams actually played really well in the losses to Utah. His defense just missed 30 tackles. So without further ado, that's all the time we have for today's podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe to the YouTube and Spotify channels. Be sure to follow the pages on Facebook and Twitter. And without further ado, Matt and I will probably continue this conversation more. We're just running out of time. So
yes,
we're out.